All right, I have one more example, and we're going to kind of start something from the beginning this time. I'll kind of show you some additional ways that I start with something that's really, really curved or something that would maybe have organic shapes to it. Now, I'm not doing all of this, but I'm going to get this main body completed to show you how I would approach it. So I actually have played violin for like over 30 years, so I can tell you that other than these sides, there is nothing flat on a violin. There is just nothing flat other than those sides that give you those initial supports. But you can see here that like the top is curved, the bottom is curved. It's definitely not flat. Plus you have all these kind of weird sections across the top. So I'll show you a way that we can get started with something complicated like this. So I'm going to start a new part, and I'm going to start on my top plane, and I'm just going to create a center line. And we'll go ahead and give this a dimension. I think 16 is a little bit big, but that's what I've been using. I didn't actually measure my instrument. I think it's closer to 12, but it'll be fine for what we need it for. I'm going to go under tools, sketch tools, and then there's an option at the bottom for a sketch picture. And this actually allows you to bring in like a reference picture into SolidWorks that you can then sketch over. And so this is what I would do for something like this top face of a violin that has all these curves to it. Now, pictures are massive, especially if you take them with your cell phone, because I remember when I bought my first like digital camera and it was like 4.1 megapixel and I was like so proud of myself. Now they're like what, 40, something like insane like that. So your pictures are gigantic. So we do want to move them. We do want to scale them. And how you can scale it is using this blue arrow. I get a lot of questions where people don't really realize what this blue arrow is for. It's your scale tool. So what you want to do is I'm going to line this up and I'm going to kind of look at where the arrow is. And once I release my cursor, this is telling me this is about 21 inches. I want it to be 16, so I'm going to type in 16, and my picture actually scaled so that the height of the body is 16. It's really just there to help you scale the picture a little bit faster and a little bit easier. Now, this is all that I leave in this sketch. I'm going to sketch other things on top of it, but the reason why I leave this alone is because eventually I will want to get rid of the picture and not see it. So I kind of leave it in its own sketch so I can hide it and show it as needed. So I'm going to start a second sketch, and I am eventually going to mirror this. I'm going to do one side, and I'm going to create a point, which I'm actually going to need later. So I'm just prepping myself for that. But now, if I wanted to go into my spline tool, this is where I would start using the picture as a reference to get a lot of these curves. So this is not an exact science. We could certainly add additional dimensions to this as needed, but for this example, I'm just going to go ahead and grab kind of the outline, and that actually looks pretty good. I'm going to do this a couple more times. You could really, if you're like OCD, you could like really spend a lot of time doing this. So just kind of be aware of that. Yep, we've all done stuff like that. But you can drag these points around so that they fit a little bit better, drag it down a little bit. Again, this is getting into something that's a little bit more fluid. And then we'll do the top section. So again, going ahead, grabbing some of these, I might have to adjust that. Again, at the top, I'm adding a horizontal sketch relation so that when I mirror this, that ends up being a pretty good seamless transition there. And I'm going to adjust this a little bit. All right. And I do want to close this. I'm just going to close this with a solid line, or a straight line, I should say. They're all solid, but this will be straight. And I'm going to go ahead and mirror this across. And then now if I hide this, we can see I have kind of my outline of something that's pretty complicated, but I was able to utilize symmetry and a sketch to kind of get there pretty quickly. Now I'm going to start with those flat sides. So I'm going to go into my surface and choose extruded surface. I'm going to leave this as a surface because everything else I'm going to create is going to be a surface until I'm ready to kind of combine everything. So I have kind of my base surface here. Now, if I take a look at my picture, there is actually a couple sections in here where it is flat and then it kind of curves. There's a couple ways you could do this. I'm going to start as just a planar surface. So planar surfaces is kind of what it sounds like. There's no real curve to it. It's like a plane, it's flat. But we can still use it as a tool. If you right click on an edge, I'll choose select open loop because then I don't have to select every little tiny edge. So that saves you a lot of time there. There's also a select tangency inside of that right click menu, which saves me quite a bit of time. So I'll go ahead and offset this. Again, we'll trim it and remove the middle section. So I have my main items here. And what I'm going to do is the curved top of this, I'm going to use as a filled surface. We haven't seen that yet. The filled surface is actually good for this because I have a very distinct boundary that I need this item to fit inside. I don't necessarily have like a profile sketch. I have a completed boundary. But to get kind of this bubbly kind of shape here, I'm going to add constraint curves that I can then use inside of this filled surface. So I'm going to do this on the right plane and then basically the front plane. Now, I'm not going to necessarily snap to anything right away. This is something that I have kind of learned to save myself some time doing because this is still very kind of three-dimensional on what we're working with. And so I find, if I can select things, that I can just add them later. So when I'm dealing with splines, there's a sketch relation called make pierce that I use very, very frequently. I don't use it very often unless you're working with curves or projected curves or splines or something like that. Pierce is almost like a coincident, but more three-dimensional. So it's basically extending this in the plane that this spline is on until it matches that curve, wherever it is on that curve. So I'll go ahead and add a dimension here so this isn't insane. And again, what we can do here is I can add maybe those horizontal sketch relations also here as well. Can even make them a little bit larger, a little bit smaller. Now I need to do the same thing on this other side. I need it to also go this way. So I don't have a plane there because my origin is here. So I need to create one. So this right here was why I added that little point initially. And there we go. Grabbed an extra line. And I'm going to do the same type of thing here. So again, just add a spline. I don't know exactly what the size is going to be. It's just getting a rough estimate. And every once in a while, we all have this happen. All right, there it goes. I can't highlight it. I think part of that is because this plane is still showing. I'm going to do the same thing here with this so I don't have to add a height to it. Make sure they're going to be the same height. What's interesting is even though this is technically fully defined, I can still adjust it because it is a spline. So I can still make some minor changes to it. And now I'm ready that I can actually do this filled surface. So similar to what I did before, I'll right click and say select open loop. That's going to be the perimeter. So that's pretty much flat right now. So now I can go over to my constraint curves on the left, and now I can choose those two curves that I just created. And you can see how that gives me kind of that contour in multiple directions. And if I were to take a look at this from an evaluation standpoint, I always look at the color mapping, the curvature. And one thing right here that I'm looking for just off the bat is symmetry. If this is not symmetrical, like the color coding here, It's not 100%, but it's pretty good. But if it's really far off, you probably have like an extra bump somewhere or like a wave or a crease or something in your surface. Zebra stripes is a good tool as well. This is maybe not the best example. If you're not sure what on earth zebra stripes is even trying to tell you, what it is think of how light reflects off of something that's extremely shiny. So if you've ever seen like a chrome wheel where it's kind of curved and everything's kind of distorted a little bit, that's really what it's doing. What you look for is the transition of color over different faces. So right here, see how the black to black is lined up, the white to white is lined up. It's off a little bit here, but it's pretty close to being tangent. Notice here with the sharp change in direction, it's what we call discontinuous. So if you have something that needs to have continuous curvature, that's a good tool to use. All right, I'm going to finish this up. I'm going to go ahead and mirror those bodies, those surface bodies across to the bottom. And I'm ready to turn this into a solid. I can create a solid. And now once this is a solid, I can use features like shell in order to create like my wall thickness. So yes, you do not have to choose faces to remove with the shell feature. It'll still hollow it out. So this is a good example of when you would use something like that. So it's still hollowed out the middle. We can see the inside, the curves through the cross section. So again, not a lot of real flat surfaces that we created, but give you some tips there on how to kind of get started sketching over those pictures and how to set up the filled surface. So filled surfaces are great when you have a distinct boundary, and then those contours in the middle can give you that additional shape. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. So again, I didn't go through everything in the screenshot. You can add the appearances and everything. I actually downloaded those off of the internet and applied them because violins have very specific scoring in their wood. So that would be next step things. But for now, we saw a couple examples of using surfacing just as a tool to smooth out, get rid of extra lines in your models, clean up things like fillets, bad junctures, and then how to get started with something a little bit more kind of curved or organic. Everything that we did here is kind of built into SolidWorks. If you do need something that is more like sub-D modeling, if you are more of like an industrial designer, or you make a lot of consumer products that are like super bubbly and things like that, there is like X-Shape on the 3D Experience platform. That is a completely web-based app that is a sub-D modeler. So it's like working with clay. You start with a primitive and then you like push and pull. But the 3D Experience has add-ins into SolidWorks, so you can bring that down out of the cloud and then do your parametric more design inside of SolidWorks. And it's actually an extension of SolidWorks, so that would be an option. And then there's another product that does sub-D modeling that is called Power Surface. I have not personally used Power Surface. I've heard good things about it, but that is like a separate third-party add-in for SolidWorks that does more sub-D modeling. So those two products kind of take what we have here to kind of like a whole new level. But these are great for just everyday parts, things that we end up running into all the time.